everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Zach on Film. I am the Zach on the Film. Across from me is Steven of Schleicher.
One thing I hate about St. Elmo's Fire, all the damn white people.
Okay, and all the way across the internet is Matthew Peterson.
No Springsteen is leaving this house.
So this is going to be one of those movies that I believe Steven and Matthew can quote quite well. It was released when...
I never really. I watched this movie once and I was like, if I never see this movie again, it'll be too soon.
Because St. Elmo's Fire released in 1985, which would be what, beginning of high school for you guys? I kind of forget
I would
how
have been
old you are.
sophomore.
Middle.
Yeah.
Middle of high school.
Mm-hmm. Same year as The Breakfast Club, in fact.
Right, which is very odd to me when I realized that, and I don't know, this must have came out after Breakfast Club in the release calendar, because I was reading a review of this, and they reference Breakfast Club a lot, but they surely have to, because half the cast from Breakfast Club is in St. Elmo's Fire, playing people 4 years older.
Right.
Reputedly, John Hughes actually recommended, I think, Judd and Emilio to Schumacher when he was making this mess. So after Breakfast Club, based on that experience.
Breakfast Club, 5 kids in detention in high school. St. Elmo's Fire, 6 friends?
6 dorks. Yeah.
6 dorks after graduating college. So when you have Judd Nelson and Emilio and Ali Sheevy all in the same movie, it creates for an interesting look at how characters, when they act their actual age, look.
They shake things up because they give us a little bit of an outsider, and they give us a little bit of a mannequin, and they give us whatever it is Mayor Winningham was in, and it's slightly different.
Yes,
I guess there are 7 of them, aren't there?
Are there?
Yeah, because there's Kirby, and then there's Billy and Kevin and Jules and Alec and Leslie and Wendy. So there are 7 primary characters in this.
Yeah. So essentially, St. Elmo's Fire is following these 7 kids after they graduate college. The first shot of the film is them walking arm in arm as they walk away from their respective universities' building. And then there's a car wreck. And then it's just kind of a bunch of, I don't want to say vignettes, but it kind of is vignettes of the interrelational time of these kids after college and dealing with them all kind of hooking up with each other and getting first jobs and living on their own and doing drugs and drinking a lot and hang out at the bar aptly named St. Elmo's.
Right. St. Elmo's Bar, yeah.
Yeah.
Hence the name.
If you ever get any guff from people saying millennials are the worst and millennials are ruining this and millennials are doing that, just say, hey man, have you ever watched a movie called St. Elmo's Fire? Because I think you're going to find a lot in common between your complaints about millennials and these kids from this movie.
It was truly a remarkable moment as a millennial watching this movie, and the final lines of dialogue from a movie in 1985 is 20-somethings making brunch plans.
Yes.
They might as well said, who's going to bring the avocado toast? Let's never own homes.
So this is another great example of white privilege in action and what happens to the upper class when they don't get their dreams and their promises handed to them on a silver platter. That's what this movie's about.
That is not what this movie is about. That is literally not what this movie is about.
I'm sorry. Which person who went to an Ivy League school is not having having all of their hopes and dreams and plans played out for them on the screen?
Speaking of Ivy League school, does they ever actually establish what city we're actually in?
No, but you imagine it's the Northeast. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
named
the university, and I can't remember. They did, but I can't remember what it was now.
Was it like fictional or is it real?
Oh,
it's a
Georgetown.
real university.
It's Georgetown.
Yeah, it was a real university, and I thought they were in D.C.
Yeah, it's Georgetown University.
Georgetown.
Okay, but this is the thing. I mean, this is very important when you look at this movie. This is Zach said it best. This is all of the stuff that people complain about millennials. These are Gen
Well, that's
X
what I
people.
said.
Shut up. These are the people that are of the generation that Stephen and I are. But the thing that's important to remember is the complaints are always the same. And the reason the complaints are always the same is because coming of age turns us all into little jackwagons. We saw this in previous movies. We saw it in Breakfast Club, where they're all like, okay, well, and we're a criminal and like this. This is not a movie about people not getting what they want and having to have their privilege checked. This is a movie about the realization that as an adult, you don't necessarily get to go and do all the stupid crap that you thought you were going to get to do as an adult. This is a movie about coming
Wait,
to terms with your
Is
responsibilities.
that not the exact same thing?
No.
What you're just saying?
It's literally not.
Okay,
Because
how so?
One is the perspective of an old person looking down their nose and saying, well, these people are idiots. And while that may be true, if you remember being 22 and 23 and 24, everybody is an idiot. And that's part of the reason that this movie resonates for me is this is a movie about figuring out what in the world it is that your brain is about. And even if you are a facile little jerk, you're going to have to figure out how to be an adult on some terms. They won't necessarily even be your terms. So you can say to me that this is a movie about spoiled brats who aren't getting what they wanted. But really, this is a movie about people who have this conception, this teenage, this college age conception of who they are and who they think they should be, coming face to face with the realization that they aren't, can't, and won't ever be that person. So now who the hell are you gonna...
they're having their dreams shattered of what they expect to be handed to them after school, after college.
Absolutely not.
You just said that.
I did not.
You did. What did he say? Is he just repeating the exact same thing? Is he just going around in a circle or not, Zach?
It's I think you're both making subtly different arguments of that circle around the same idea of kids not understanding what the world is like.
Nobody understands what the world is like. Adults don't understand what the world is like. And to look at this and say that they're spoiled brats who are having their precious little dreams, their little bubbles burst, is somehow to imply that we know better. And we really don't. And I think that is why I enjoy this movie. I won't say I love it. It's certainly not my favorite Breakfast Club chunk of movie, but it's in the top 5. It's one of those movies that if it's on, I will stop and watch this until Demi Moore has her meltdown, because that's uncomfortable and creepy and just way too 80s for me.
And plus, there's only like 5 minutes left of the movie anyway.
Right.
Well,
I don't
there's
necessarily need to see Rob Lowe get redeemed at the end. That's not the point of this movie, to me anyway.
Yeah, I saw this movie in like 86, and I was like, yeah, none of these people know what they're doing. And there was no part of this movie ever that I sat there and said, oh, these are people that I can relate to, because there was no way that I could relate to anybody in this movie.
Really?
Yeah, nobody.
There's a very I don't think any of these kids truly act like they're out of college, at least from my perception of out of college is obviously my perception of out of college and not the potentially like the norm of out of college. But for me, a lot of their aspects of how specifically the guys acted was very like junior in high school, which then I can relate to a lot, especially Emilio Estevez's character and being like a truly creepy stalker guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a very high school, like latching on to a girl you don't even really know that well and being super creepy. But yeah, there are definitely ideas in this movie of these characters that are relatable and understandable, which is what makes this movie appealing. My problem with St. Elmo's Fire in general is that I think it does try to redeem too much and not specifically the male characters of them being for the most part, incredibly chauvinistic, sexist douches who have no
Yeah.
understanding of like
problem.
women's authority and how they can like live their own lives.
Yeah, that's a problem that you see, not the women thing necessarily, but the resolution and the wrapping up of things in a way too fast, way too pat manner. That's kind of a thing that you see in everything that I know I attribute to Joel Schumacher anyway. So I don't know if that's him as a creator or if that's just stories that he's, attracted to. But yeah, you get to the last few minutes of this movie, and even if you enjoyed the first part, you can just kind of tune out. I mean, it's not a movie that has to have the wrap up ending and that there's too many kids there joke at the end, and it's just like, no, I'm good. I'll just flash out early. It's fine.
Yeah, but I think this movie would have been served a lot better if they would have done the real world thing and said what they almost did like 6/8 of the way through this movie of they all weren't friends at the end. Because
Right.
that is a very real college thing. Like you made good relationships in college and you don't stay great friends after college because you change and you like become like a political douche and you like steal this girl's girlfriend and you're like a stalker dude and you do like a lot of drugs. You break up friendships and that happens and there's
And
yeah.
having them come back together like that actually damages to me the stories being told. Because you don't want like Wendy. You don't want Wendy to be attached to her douche friends. Wendy's the one who's trying to do good in the world, who's working at the homeless shelter, who's refusing her dad's, get a boyfriend and we'll give you one of our stores and you can live off the family money. You don't want her to be with these people. And you're afraid of what's going to happen when Emilio Estevez actually gets a crush on, one of the girls in the group and follows them around wearing a clown mask. It's creepy.
Yeah, his character specifically rubbed me the wrong way the entire movie, and how, especially when he kisses,
Andy McDowell.
Yeah, is she
Dale.
from Ghostbusters? What's she from?
No. She's from Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Nope.
She's from a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot.
She's very familiar. And he kisses her, and then it's like, I'm the stud hero. I'm like, no, you are literally the biggest creep almost in cinema history.
I know why you know her in a Bill Murray context.
Oh, Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good job.
She was also in Magic Mike XXL.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What else? She was in Footloose.
She was in Footloose?
In the 2011 remake of Footloose.
Oh, okay. The terrible Footloose. I know she married Gerard Depardieu at one point, and she was in 4 Weddings and a Funeral. But I always remember her from Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which is a great movie, and we should do it on this show someday.
Someday. Yeah. Maybe. But who knows? It took how many years to watch not Star Wars?
Yeah.
Hey, we still haven't gotten to Surf Nazis Must Die.
Yeah, and we won't be doing that either.
No, that's a long way to the never. So it is very interesting. Again, we watched Rob Lowe and Emilio Estevez last week.
Yeah, Rob Lowe, who got a Razzie Award for the worst supporting actor for this film.
They were doing Razzie Awards in 85?
Razzie Awards have been around for a long time.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
He got a worst performance award for this?
Yep.
Yeah.
For worst supporting actor.
Do you think Rob Lowe was the worst actor in this movie?
That's tough.
It is a toss. It is really a toss up between Demi Moore and who we were just talking about.
Rob Lowe.
No,
Andy McDowell.
Andy McDowell.
Andy McDowell.
Wooden as hell. This is the thing. Even Judd Nelson isn't really excellent in this. And Nelson usually can inhabit a role. This just, I don't know. This feels a little bit too much like John Bender pretending to be grown up for me. Mm-hmm. So this is not a movie that you watch for the acting. With the exception of Andrew McCarthy and the daughter from Amen as the hooker and their long and involved, chats on the street corner, which I think are supposed to be super important, but actually feel kind of superfluous. I don't know.
And again, that's another real problem that I have with this film. Here's all of these white people. Every shot, white people, white people, white people. The only black person that you see in this film who has any kind of a role is a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
But, she is the magical person who helps him to turn his life around. So, at least she's a recognizable trope, I guess. I don't know.
And what a weird character development that was for what was his name?
Andrew McCarthy.
Yeah, Andrew McCarthy's Kevin character.
Kevin Dolan. So I remember
Kevin,
after Mickey.
because I guess it's almost like a gambit throughout this whole movie of like, Kevin, it's time, it's okay. Like, you can be comfortable with being open with your sexuality. Like, we get it. It's cool. And then it's like, we strung out in the whole interaction with the prostitute is her being like, I just assumed like you were gay. And then it's like, nope, I'm secretly in love with one of our friends. Like, why? Where did they think like this would be the good plot line to get around to this love story? Is we'll just like tinker around with his sexuality.
You've never heard the song Jesse's Girl?
I've heard that song. Is it irrelevant to this?
I think it's right on with this. Here's
Maybe
a guy
I've never actually listened to this song.
a guy that's in love with Jesse's girl. He wishes that he had Jesse's girl. The only thing missing from the St. Elmo's Fire soundtrack is Jesse's girl, because that is exactly what Kevin McCarthy is doing throughout this whole film. Is he is in love with someone else's girlfriend, and he can't express himself to come out and say, I like you.
But I don't think that's what Zach is questioning. I think what Zach is questioning is the plot line where everyone presumes that Kevin is gay. And I think that you have to look at this from the perspective of, it is 1986. And so, a movie aimed at youngish people in 1986, I think having an openly gay character would have, in the parlance of the times, made it a little bit more adult than what they were looking for. But this is a movie that was made by Joel Schumacher, who has been openly gay, like, I believe, since the 70s. So, yeah, I think that is an interesting question. Is that a way to have some sort of representation, some sort of admission that, LGBT people exist even in 1986, even though it's not true of Kevin, it's not germane to anything, but it's in there. I think it may be like the scenes with the prostitute to try and give us some verisimilitude to the story.
Well, Demi Moore's next door neighbor is gay.
Right. That is in there. So I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it is just to do that for 3/4 of the movie, and then to throw in his admission of love after Ali Sheevy's been wrecked.
Well, and that goes back to storytelling and acting, in that it needed to be supported a little bit more through the story that he is pining after her. I mean, you kind of get the sense because he's always hanging around those two.
Right.
Sure.
He's always getting frustrated whenever Alec shows up. He gets bored and leaves whenever they start having sex. So you can kind of see that there's that this love that he has for her is there, but it's not brought out enough in the story.
I agree. And I think it is interesting that I think Jules actually thinks that he's in love with Alec because of the closeness that he has to the two of them, which, again, I don't know. It's kind of an ambiguous moment, but I think that it is nice that he denies it, but he doesn't flip out about it. He doesn't act like it's a terrible slur upon his family name, which is a plus, I guess.
Yeah, sure. It is just...
Yeah, it's a weird.
Odd
it's
to
a
me
weird
that they would like you said, Stephen, that they weren't putting more in there to be like, because he just continually talked about, I think, like a secret love.
Yeah, some secret love that he has,
which is.
I mean, the worst. I mean, the only thing that was missing was, oh yeah, I have a girlfriend. She's from Canada. You don't know her. That's what this film needed.
She moved
a little
away
bit more
and then
that.
she died, so you can't call her and check or nothing.
And there is, so let's look at Rob Lowe's character, who is bouncing around. He's dating one of the girls whose name slips me because that's how I do.
Well, he's dating Mayor Winningham's character,
yes.
Wendy.
Sort of.
While he's married
to another character who's barely in the
Right.
film, with a child.
Mm-hmm.
And even
Right.
when we're clearly set, he's with Wendy, he's like hitting on a bunch of other girls at St. Elmo's bar, and then the whole Wendy thing blows up, and it was a strange journey for Billy as he bounced around between the girls in the group and random people at the bar and his actual wife, while not being able to hold down a job. It is confusing how this man actually graduated from Georgetown.
Right.
Entirely based on charisma.
This is he's the poster boy for Don't Hate the Playa.
To some degree, yeah. And she's, to be fair, she's in love with him. He's a jerk to everyone, and she's still in love with him. So you're kind of like, okay, Wendy, you have bad taste in men.
Yeah, he is very much just seemingly using her for rent money that she continually gets from her dad that she leaves for him to use.
Yeah, it's that fine line of when exactly are you using someone just for their money? And I think about 20 minutes before the movie started.
He also has a very childish, weird, sexual, assaulty, rapey vibe scene with Demi Moore when they're both hammered drunk and she needs a friend and he decides, yeah, but what if you give me a blowjob? I think that would make at least me feel better. I'll put your keys down my pants and go around with you. So that was not the most comfortable of scenes to watch, which is most of this movie, I guess.
That's an understatement there, Zach.
There are some definitely uncomfortable moments to it. That I think is probably, if not the worst, the second worst part of it. I think the worst is when he traces her out to her cabin and ends up spending the night in Andy McDowell's cabin.
Oh,
and then sticks his tongue down her throat and takes a picture of it.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad scene. Also, because when they actually looked at the Polaroid, that was clearly not taken
it's from the same angle,
guy was singing, which was just also just like wildly confusing.
Yeah,
and that's, and again, that the scene with Rob Lowe and Demi Moore gets back into the weird thing. It could have been more powerful, I thought, but after the scene's over and Demi gets in the car and drives off, we just hang around with Rob Lowe because it's like, oh no, Rob, your wife saw you with this other girl. Oh no. Meanwhile, Demi's character is, driving off after one of her good friends essentially, tried to assault her and doesn't really care about where she is in life. And we just gloss over that fact so we can have a potentially emotional scene with Rob Lowe's weird earring and hair. Which, and again, like I read it earlier, that's my biggest problem with the scene is like we try to redeem the characters.
Rob Lowe.
We try to redeem a lot of these characters that really we shouldn't try to be redeeming.
Well,
Emilio Estevez's character is the same way. Stalker dude just brushes it off and is like, hey, I kissed a girl, I scored. I'm going to go back and be a lawyer now and see who I can stalk next. Rob Lowe's character, as you've already mentioned, Andrew McCarthy's character, again, he's maybe even worse than the Emilio Estevez character because Andrew McCarthy has been stalking the girl that he loves secretly and quietly for years. And then when she's like, I think we need to be friends. This is just like a one-time thing that just happened. He's like, oh no, we need to be boyfriend, girlfriend. She's like, no. And
oh yeah, they're like the last, again, 10 minutes of the movie when they tried to resolve that relationship between him and Shivi and Nelson is just so odd and not handled well at all.
Don't you think we can all three be friends? Sure. Okay. And then what they're really thinking is, oh, we'll just give it a couple weeks and then she'll be with me or she'll be with me. That's what they're thinking. And it's just that.
Man, that is so cynical.
Look at them. They're both thinking that as they're walking away.
Well, sure. But I mean, this is the thing. We are tearing this movie apart because of things that either were bad to begin with or haven't aged well. And moments that I think work. I actually
So
like
what's
the ending because
what's an example of something that works?
the ending part where they're both like, "Hey, you love me, right? Hey, you love me," and she's like, "I'm not dating anybody right now." I like that. I think that that works really well. And that stupid moment on the fire escape where Rob Lowe is all like, "Hey, sweetie, it's just St. Elmo's fire, man. It's just electricity in the clouds and all like that." That works for me. That is really, really, really cool. That feels like the kind of bullcrap that young people would think is really philosophical and deep, and yet somehow it works. It reaches her. It hits her on the level that it pulls her back from the edge of whatever it is she was doing. I guess trying to freeze to death in her living room. But
Yeah, I guess.
that's the thing. That works. That narratively actually kind of pulls that scene out for me. That works really well. And I have to admit, I like the point where Wendy realizes that she does not want the screw up, no matter how beautiful he is. And he's like, "Well, let me give you a going away present." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And he gives her the going away present, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm done with you. You're out. Goodbye now." I kind of like that.
Wait, was the going away
sex.
present was the sex, right?
Yeah.
The
that was
sex,
also
yes.
weird.
No. She didn't
No,
want
it
to be a
was.
virgin anymore.
It's
And
weird.
it happens, and sometimes you deal with that. It happens.
I don't know. It was kind of weird.
No,
It
it was
kinda
really weird.
It was like weird.
It wasn't so.
So you thought the better moments of the film were actually the ending?
I feel like there are moments that emotionally resolve little bits and mini arcs, and you're describing it as a series of vignettes. Actually, is perfect because I have no idea how long this movie takes place over. It feels like it's got to be a year.
It's about a year.
It has to be
It's a year.
because they do season
Yeah.
changes very deliberately.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And you kind of get to a point where you're just like, all these things are happening and they're all leading their separate lives and they're trying to stay together and they really need to stop trying to stay together. But there are moments that actually feel like they have some emotional resolution. And like the moment where Rob Lowe and Demi Moore are talking and he's like, all these terrible things are happening. There wasn't even a St. Elmo. They just made it up because they needed something to keep them going. That worked for me. And I think that as much as I complain about we need to give him a redemption arc, that moment, if you take it away from the fact that 20 minutes before he was assaulting in her Jeep, that moment works in and of itself. And I think that's the biggest problem with this movie. There are lots of little scenes that that the actors had fun with and that they loved that were really pretty well crafted and put together. Dinner at Wendy's house where mom whispers bad things. Where'd you meet? Prison.
Yeah, it was a pretty good scene.
That was a pretty good scene.
It was a good scene.
And it was like 2 minutes of good in the middle of 10, 15 minutes of, wait, what? He's chasing her into the mountains? This is like a horror movie. And now we're stuck in The Shining, and Emilio Estevez does not look right. He looks like he's 20 pounds heavier in this movie.
But besides that, the jarring fade car screech cut of the beginning from walking from the building to their friends having a drunk driving accident, I thought the first scene at the bar was pretty good. It was funny. It was light. They made pee jokes about ice and urinals, which is pretty good.
Because it tastes better.
They catch Emilio. They rat their friend out to their boss because he's drinking on the job. That was a fun, I don't know, 4 minutes, something like that. That was a good time for me. The dinner scene was good.
Bits and pieces of it are good. Even the moment where the businessman comes home and finds Rob Lowe holding a party, and he's like, "Kim, you were supposed to be home tomorrow." It's doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of sense or meaning or actual consequence in the film, except as an example of what a big screw up he is. But just for those few moments, that music video director trick of let's make 3 minutes of this absolutely compelling, it works. And then you get back into something that makes you hate everyone and everything in the movie. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because when Schumacher was trying to pass this movie around, trying to get it made, he said, quote, "A lot of people turned down the script. The head of one major studio called its 7-member cast the most loathsome humans he had ever read on the page."
It's not a bad description.
Schumacher had to interview hundreds of people to try to get them to be in this movie and turned him down.
Really?
Yes.
I feel like who in the world was he interviewing before he landed? Like,
let's see, Anthony Edwards.
The top
Anthony
Rat
Edwards.
Pack kids.
Anthony Edwards. Leah Thompson, that we've already seen before.
Yeah.
Other, as Matthew said, the Estevez, Nelson, and Sheedy came from recommendation from John Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But he had to push hard to get the studio to cast them. And even before the movie began, they had to get Demi Moore into rehab before they could shoot.
Oh, in real life?
See,
that's too bad.
That's why she was able to play the cocaine addicted alcoholic girl so well. I don't know. Or maybe too well. Probably too well.
Here's the thing. At the beginning of 1985, in February, Breakfast Club came out. It was really, really good. And a lot of people were like, wow, this is really good. These kids have a lot of things to go through and a lot of potential in their careers. And then not 6 months later, this movie comes out in June. And suddenly everyone is like, these kids can't act. This is the epitome of what the Brat Pack is. This is just awful. And I remember watching the interviews and the behind the scenes stuff, because really the only entertainment outlet we had was like Entertainment Tonight. And I just remember people just panning this left and right, just saying, this is a horrible movie. And I was like, well, okay, I'm not going to see this in the theater, but it ended up on a VHS tape.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I was like, wow, I can really see why everyone's saying this.
Don't you think? I think this movie suffers from something we see a lot now in Hollywood, and it's like throw all of the celebrities against the wall and hope 10 stick, and then we'll try to make like $80 million on a $50 million budget.
Yeah.
That's what this movie felt like. It's like, let's try to get all of the hot 20-something actors, and we're going to throw a script in where they each get exactly 34 minutes of screen time.
Each, yeah.
They each get 4 scenes by themselves or paired with one other person, so there's only 2 people on screen, and it'll be fine. It'll be kids out of college, and they're all doing their thing, and there's the writer, and there's the weird political guy, and then they're all doing like drugs, and it'll be fine. They learn something at the end. That seems like the weird elevator pitch that Schumacher tried to give ahead of a studio, and be like, but we'll make a lot of money because they're famous.
Mm-hmm.
I think we see that, I don't know, every other month right now in our theater with how many people you can put on the screen.
Right.
Yeah, I just saw something the other day that I had never sat down and watched, and I can't remember what it's called now, but it's got Liam Neeson and Hugh Grant and like literally everybody British in it. And Professor Snape is in it, married to Professor Trelawney, but they're having, weird problems. And there's like 15 different stories. What is that?
Oh God. Oh, it's the
Love
one
Actually.
Love with
Love
the cards
Actually.
And they do the
Yeah.
Love Actually.
And Bill Nighy tying it all together as a rock star who promised to get naked if his hit goes to number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't have that movie or, Valentine's Day or New Year's Eve or whatever all these pick a holiday and throw 50 people at it movies are without St. Elmo's Fire, I believe. So at the very least, it's got that going for us in terms of its legacy.
Which is not great. And what do you think makes The Breakfast Club succeed where St. Elmo's Fire fails?
Well, okay, so
puns.
What is lacking is self-realization, right? So in The Breakfast Club, at the end of this movie, and they all say it in the letter, they know who they are. Mm-hmm. They've been stereotyped, and they know that everyone is going to look at them as the stereotype. But they also know that they are more than that stereotype, and they're going to survive, and they're going to get out of the stereotype that anyone decides to put them in. This movie, all of the kids are self-absorbed, and they don't realize what their problems are. They don't have a self-realization of who they are, or what they want to be. And at the end of the movie, they still don't. And that's where the two movies really differ from one another.
I disagree, actually. I think that the weaknesses of this film are the same weaknesses of The Breakfast Club. And I think part of it comes down to an oversimplification both the character and the arcs. I feel like the treatment of the female characters in both movies is equally problematic from a 30 years later perspective. And I think that coming out of The Breakfast Club and thinking that any of those kids have their crap metaphorically more together than anyone coming out of this movie, I think that that's a seriously rosy outlook, because you know that Bender and Claire are going to come back to school on Monday and try and support a teenage relationship that is literally going to melt down in their face. But I feel like part of the reason that Breakfast Club works better is because you get kind of inside the characters. You get more of an internal life. You get more than just that surface level. Emilio, for instance, in Breakfast Club, seems to be this meathead jock, but he has hidden depths, and he has, regrets that he can't talk about because that's a weakness, and weakness is for losers. Emilio here is an overconfident dickhead who does overconfident dickhead things, and at the end of the movie hasn't learned anything, has, traced a woman and her boyfriend out into the wilderness. He's like literally one pocket knife away from being a serial killer. And at the end of the film, he feels like he's done all right because he kissed her and she didn't stop him. And I think the difference here is everybody's arc here is pretty superficial. Even the moment where, Jules starts out as seeming to be this weird Richie airhead girl, and then we see that she really is, she has feelings and she has a heart and she's hurt by all these things. And then at the end of the movie, what does she do? She embraces that Richie airhead thing again and talks about how she can, bury her stepmother in a cat suit and then take her to the pet cemetery. And I'm like, everybody in this movie at the end, once you've gotten through and they're like, okay, well, we've wrapped everything up and everybody's gotten their little bow and their little knot, they haven't really learned anything. But the weaknesses of character are roughly the same here as they are in Breakfast Club. And I think Breakfast Club is probably more coherently and better written in terms of the actual conflicts and dialogue.
Well, that's certainly true. The script differences, I think, are drastic between
Oh, yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah, the unrealization of what their deeper problems are in each character in St. Elmo's Fire is ultimately a downfall, because, like you said, Emilio's character in Breakfast Club acknowledges his front, who he is deeper down, and why they can't always mesh at the same time. He is still stalker number one from the beginning to the end of this movie. They try, I think, with Rob Lowe and Demi Moore's character, to be like, we have, addiction problems, we're gonna overcome them, and then they don't necessarily, and it doesn't ever seem like they really make a good,
right. They don't
try
ever
at it.
Yep.
No, Judd Nelson's character never acknowledges his the
misogyny.
Misogyny, certainly. I mean, that's just
womanizing
blanket throughout most of them in every male character in this movie, of his willingness to throw away his ideals and morals that we've roughly established that he had in college so that he can make more money and have a bit bigger couch. And they never really took the time, because there was none, to delve into his unending pursuit of more wealth and influence and what that can actually do to a person, because we had to deal with how every other character in the film, and we couldn't individually dive into like, why do you make these decisions really, and how are you going to be a better 25-year-old than you have been a 24-year-old or a 30-year-old and going on through your life. And that, to me, like I think we've all stated, is the downfall of St. Elmo's Fire, because you don't actually think in 3 years any of these people are going to have any better grasp of like themselves or their place in the world and what they actually want to be doing. They'll probably all still be like, don't you remember the great times we had in college and we did the cool things and let's go, do some coke and drink at St. Elmo's is how I feel like they're all going to be, and they're like 34 based off.
But no,
this
they're
movie.
gonna go to
Oh right, sorry. Oh god, I forgot that. Oh no, you're right. That is the emotional development. We're gonna go we're gonna get day drunk at brunch instead of night drunk at a pizza bar.
We're going to erect a facade of adulthood in front of our same destructive behaviors. And I'll give them credit. They really tried to create characters who had flaws and feet of clay and who had issues that could have been addressed. But what the movie really does is it sets those up as like their hat. Here's your hat. You're the wild child crazy guy. You're the one who's all stupid and got a girl pregnant, and now you're married and you don't want to be married and you've got all this. But then it's just, hey, look at this cool hat. And then at the end of the movie, the realization that he has is, oh, well, heck, that sure is my hat. But they don't actually address it. I feel like there's a lot of points in this movie where they could have done more emotional stuff, or they could have done things that might actually have taught the character something, but instead they went for those feel-good moments, which admittedly, those feel-good moments are the things that not 5 minutes ago I was saying work for me in the movie. So I'm not saying that I was not successfully manipulated by the Hollywood gloss of the bits and pieces of this movie. And I think that's kind of hard to get away from. It's hard to look at a moment where Rob Lowe is being legitimately adorable and go, yeah, Rob Lowe, you sure are right.
You sure are sweaty in that scene where you're playing a saxophone and dripping your sweat all over everybody sitting in the front row.
Hey.
And when that saxophone keeps playing, when you take your mouth off the reed, but it's one of those moments where we never get past that surface level. We never actually delve into, well, what's the deal? What are you going to do about your addiction, Billy? I'm going to move away to another city. That'll fix everything. Great. That's an excellent answer until you think about it for less than 30 seconds. And that's kind of the problem. You get to the end of this and you're like, these are all excellent responses until you think about it for about 30 seconds.
This movie failed where I think, and again, it's not completely fair to compare I don't know, I'm going to guess a 2-hour movie to
110 minutes is what this is.
Yeah, close enough.
So
to I don't know how many seasons Girls was show, but I think Girls is like long serialized version of St. Elmo's Fire, where it's like millennials out of college who have no idea what the hell they're doing and can't like manage their lives at all, but set in 2011 to 2017. There is the characters at least always call each other on their shit throughout the entire show.
In Girls,
okay. They are constantly, and if a character's not doing it, the show itself is calling out these people for how narcissistic and insane they act and destructive, and they can't put anything like 2 sentences together without destroying someone's life or a friendship. That show does what I wish St. Elmo's Fire was. Of just like someone has got to be like, you are acting like a freaking moron at some point. And if a character
because
the movie should have.
Every parent we see in this film are enablers.
Oh, well, how many parents do we only see?
We see Wendy's
parents,
and he's an enabler.
Yeah, not
who else do we meet?
Not good. He's like, hey, why don't you stop having a career and be a married woman?
Right. We hear about Jules' mother-in-law and fathers, who enable her by not being around.
Right.
That's probably it as far as the parental figures. But you're right. There's no parental figure here to give. There's not even a sage bartender who can set Emilio Estevez right to say, "Hey, kid, you're 20 minutes late for work. Where were you?"
Sean's dad from Boy Meets World, a more prevalent character in this movie.
I am so glad that there isn't that character, because yes, I can see the problem of these characters careening through life, but having that sage older character would actually be just another moment of Hollywood cliche that's, oh, gee, thanks, Mr. Frassum Stassum. We're all straightened out now. That would not help this movie. That would, in fact, hinder the parts of it that actually work.
But then of course you've got the problem of not only are the parents enabling the bad behavior, but the characters themselves are enabling the bad behavior in each other. So like Andrew never pulls Kirby aside and says, hey man, this is really weird and not right. You should stop doing this. Right? Nobody does that. They're just like, well, okay, I guess if you're going to go spend a bunch of money on a lunch, go right ahead. I suppose if you want to go chase her up to the cabin in the woods, go right ahead. Here's my car. Go right ahead. So, yeah, that's problematic, too.
Well, they're young and they're stupid. Young, stupid people don't always call their friends on their crap.
But they're young and stupid, and it's like, let's celebrate them for it. You know what I mean? That's the problem with this movie, is like, I don't think the movie, no character calls out any of their characters throughout the movie. And the film itself, through music and editing, is saying, these are the heroes, they're making fine decisions, it's going to be fine. That is, I mean, Emilio's scene is insane, and they portray it as he ended up on a high note for this movie. And that's not like a commentary. I feel like the movie, with the music and how they edit it, is he did all right for himself.
Yeah, and that's more of the Hollywood crap. That's we have to give him the happy ending. We have to do that moment. We have to have the expectation that just coming up to a girl and saying that you love her means now she actually has something that she owes you. That shows up in a lot of movies, and we have a lot of the I'm doing creepy things, but it's okay because at the end of the movie she's totally into it and kissing me. Especially in 80s flicks, aimed at this kind of demographic. But I don't know if this film celebrates them so much as it says, hey, they're kind of doing the best they can with what they have, and aren't we all screwed up? And gosh, let's all enjoy a nice brunch at Houlihan's. I don't know. I never know nothing.
I like what Janet Maslin of the New York Times said. St. Elmo's Fire is most appealing when it simply gives the actors a chance to flirt with the camera and with one another. When it attempts to take seriously the problems of characters who are spoiled, affluent, and unbearingly smug, it becomes considerably less attractive.
Is that from their 85 review?
That is from the 85 review.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. I think that is appropriate, and that is exactly where the great parts of this film come in.
So,
and there are great parts. There are like 9 of them.
End our Rat Pack era with St. Elmo's Fire, and we're moving on from Emilio Estevez and Rob Lowe and the like as we venture on forward into more Zach on Film territory. Isn't that right, Stephen?
Yes, we're starting with horror films as we move through the end of September and into October in our hiatus. Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be fun times, Zach.
Which is appropriate because it just had one of the largest R-rated box office weekends right before we recorded this.
Yep.
And so how scared am I going to be next week? I can't remember the movie we're watching.
Next week, you probably won't be too scared, but you might roll your eyes and say, oh, look at these cute little kids and what they tried to do with their film school project. But you have to keep in mind, this was the first time this had been done.
Jesus Christ, is it Blair
with
Witch
the Blair Witch Project.
Oh, God.
Oh, don't you come at the Blair Witch Project.
The problem with this movie, not with this movie, of this string of movies we're about to
I promise you, after the Blair
film.
Witch Project, the next horror films get increasingly much better.
But the thing I have with horror movies is I have this love-hate relationship with it where I feel like I've missed out on very influential, good cinema because me no want bad dreams.
Well, be prepared to have bad dreams then.
Yeah, especially next week.
At least one of these you've already seen. So, and maybe 2 of them, because after Blair Witch we have Get Out.
Yeah,
which I think you've seen.
I've seen.
Halloween.
Joy. No.
The Ring.
No.
It Follows.
No.
You haven't seen that?
No, I wanted to watch it.
You're the one that was like,
it.
Steven, we need to watch this film.
I've heard it's amazing.
It's so great. It's amazing. And then we wrap it all up with The Omen at the very end.
That's the thing. I hear so much specifically in like the last like 4 years, that there have been really good horror movies made, and I have watched one, and it was made this last year.
What, the
With
Invitation?
Get Out. No, Get Out.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Invitation. Jesus Christ. That movie's terrible.
You should watch Unfollowed. Yeah. No, Unfriended. That's what it is.
Blair Witch Project next week
So
on
next
Zach
week,
on Film.
I'm very interested
I'm
to see how
psyched.
it goes. So that's next week on Zach on Film. In the meantime, head over to majorspoilers.com and give all of your thoughts on St. Elmo's Fire and any of the topics we have discussed in the podcast posting page you can find over there. While you're also browsing the site and you think, hey, I need to make myself feel better, I will do some shopping. And I will click on that Amazon.com link and I will find a Blu-ray version of probably Blair Witch Project. I don't know. They probably
I
shot
think
like
there is, or at least
nothing, right?
the new updated Blair Witch Project movie.
Yeah,
they did. That's probably.
Oh yeah, Witch or whatever.
Yeah.
You can
Blair
find
Witch, yeah.
all of your horror movie favorites over on Amazon.com.
Oh, Blair Witch is in Blu-ray.
Hey, look at that. It's not going to cost you any extra when you use that link at Major Spoilers, but a little bit of that purchase money will come back to Major Spoilers to help podcasts like this continue week after week after never-ending week. You can also help by joining the Patreon, which is always a great way to continue helping this.
Yep, patreon.com/major spoilers. Sign up, get access to behind-the-scenes stuff, extra content, original art, so much more. And again, small monthly contribution keeps us going for months and months and months. That's patreon.com/major spoilers.
Thank you so much to everyone who signs up to Patreon, use the Amazon.com link. We are watching Blair Witch Project next week on Zach on Film.
This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC. This podcast is copyright 2017 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.